Today we are doing my wrap up for the month of May and my TBR for the month of June. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It has been a little while since I've posted a video on here. That is because of a lot of life stuff going on. Me and my wife just had our second baby, a little boy. Everyone's doing well, but that is why I haven't posted for about a month and a half, because there's been a lot of stuff going on, as you might well imagine. Now that has also impacted my reading over this month and a half a fair bit, again, as you might well imagine, but I still read a fair number of books in May. I imagine my reading in June may well be minimized considerably from that, but we will see how we go with that. And that is why, in fact, I have combined my usually two separate videos of my wrap up and my TBR. Today they are combined because I actually think my TBR is going to be small enough that it's still going to make a reasonable video, and it's going to be a reasonable length. So let's jump in with what I read in the month of May. So in the month of May, I had 9 books on my TBR, 9. Now that's a lot for me. An average reading month for me is between 6 and 8 books generally, but I had 9 books down. I knew I wasn't going to get to them all. I actually did very, very poorly. I only read 5 of those 9. I did actually read 7 books in May though. I picked up 2 books that weren't even on my TBR. I enjoyed one of them immensely. The other one was more average, but it was a nice quick read. There were 4 books I didn't get to from that TBR. So if you were excited for some of those books off that TBR list, that TBR video, I did get to over half of them, but not all of them, unfortunately. So we're going to start talking about the books that were on my TBR. The first one of those I want to talk about is A Traitor in Skyhold by John Bierce. This is book 3 of the Mage Errant series. This is a self-published young adult fantasy series. It's got a magical school setting. It's very much Harry Potter inspired in theme, although not really in writing style. I really have enjoyed reading these so far. I think I gave the first 2 books both 4 stars. I would continue in that vein with A Traitor in Skyhold. I really enjoyed it. We are continuing to follow Hugh and his bunch of lovable misfit friends. The first one of these is super short and I would highly recommend giving a go. If you don't love Into the Labyrinth book 1, then maybe don't continue, but if you really enjoy that, I would say the series only really gets better. It's at least as good going forward, improving quite a lot in my opinion, to be honest. I think A Traitor in Skyhold was good. I actually had started reading it a few months ago, came back to it in May, and I think that helped. I think I was getting a little bit burnt out on Major, and it was nice to have a couple of months break and come back to the series, and that was something that made it very enjoyable again. It is light-hearted. It is a young adult magic school setting. You are getting what you expect from that setting, but it is good fun, very enjoyable, a good read. I would certainly be continuing the series at some point if you're looking for self-published magic school fantasy young adult. John Bierce has got you covered here with Mage Errant. I gave it 4 stars for A Traitor in Skyhold. Next up, let's talk about a reread. I am continuing my Dresden Files reread, and in May I got to the biggie, the one that everyone loves. I got to Changes. Now, I'm not going to tell you much about Changes because it is book 12 of a series, and I do not want to spoil anything for any of the books in the series, but as you all will know if you've watched one of my videos before, the Dresden Files is one of my absolute favourites. I love the Dresden Files. I love Jim Butcher. I absolutely adore this. Again, we are following Harry Dresden, a titular character. He is a wizard set in Chicago who is advertising himself in the phone book as a wizard. Now, in the last 11 books, huge things have happened. Changes is, as you would expect, a massive turning point in this series. It is absolutely astonishing. It was a 5-star read for me. I cannot tell you how much I love Changes, how much I love this series, and I will never get bored of rereading or re-listening to Changes. It just is so flipping good. It is so good. It has emotional gut punches all over the place, to the point that even though I know they're coming and I've encountered them 5 or 6 times before at this point, I still absolutely adore it. It still gets me every time. And this is peak Jim Butcher here. Changes in the Dresden Files. 5 stars. I'd give it 6. I'd give it 8 stars if I could. Like, it's so flipping good. If you can cope with early Dresden, which I enjoy, but if you can cope with early Dresden, it just takes off. It just takes off. It is so flipping good. Let's stop talking about Dresden Files because I would be here for another 10 minutes if you let me. Great, so with the 4-star out the way and with my reread out the way, let's move on to my 4.5 star. Now this is Jade War by Fonda Lee, book 2 in the Greenbone saga. Jade City, I had a slightly controversial opinion on when I read this last month, and that was that I liked the second half far more than I liked the first half. I was not super impressed with the initial beginnings to Jade City. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Greenbone Saga is an urban fantasy set in an alternate world, which might sound weird, but the reason I would say urban fantasy is that it is very modern in terms of technology, in terms of the setting of the world. We are following the No Peak clan. Now, this clan is almost a gang, a mafia style organization, but much more legitimate, sort of legally recognized. It's not just a criminal enterprise, it is actually a legitimate entity. And the No Peak clan is full of green bones or green bone warriors. These are people who can use jade. So jade is this green substance, much like in our world, except it is a bioenergetic substance and basically it's magic. So those people who have the ability can use jade upon their persons to do many, many cool and interesting things. We follow this sort of almost Godfather, mafia style, almost like the Wire style urban fantasy, and it is an interesting setting. It's a very good setting. I thought Jade City started slow. Now, Jade War, which I read in May, is a big step up in my opinion. What you get from the second half of Jade City, it's that, but improved. I gave Jade War, I think I gave it 4.5 stars on Goodreads. I stand by that. I think it's a very, very solid book, something I really enjoyed. I think that the character writing by Fonda Lee is getting better and better. I think that she does a really good job continuing to build those characters and those relationships, and I think that's brilliant. Fonda Lee is not afraid of a body count, which is something I always appreciate in fantasy. I hate in gritty and grim fantasy where somehow all our protagonists survive, all the good guys survive, only tertiary, secondary characters ever get the drop. I really enjoy that Fonda Lee is not afraid to take characters we know and give them real serious consequences for their actions, and I think that's very good. And I really enjoyed Jade War. If you have any positive feelings about Jade City when you read it, I would suggest continuing with Jade War because it is a big step up in my opinion. If you really can't see any redeeming features with Jade City, move on, don't worry about it, it's all good. Moving on to the last two things from my TBR that I did get to. Now, both of these were 5-star reads for me. First up is Cage of Souls by Adrian Tchaikovsky. You guys know I am a massive Tchaikovsky stan. I love so much of his stuff. I think his sci-fi in particular is incredible. I've really enjoyed his novellas that I've read, but this one for me was an outstanding novel from Adrian Tchaikovsky. It is supremely interesting. It is told in the first person, and it is told with flashbacks as well. There are sort of two distinct timelines going on, and I really love the way that it's done. We are in a sort of post-apocalyptic world, almost a middle of the apocalypse world. We are following a character who is being sent to a prison island. He's been exiled to a prison island. He's one of the prisoners, and we follow his exploits there. And then in the flashbacks, we follow what has happened in his life that has caused him to be there. I think the world building and the setting is incredible. I really love it. It is very much standard Tchaikovsky. If you have read any of his non-space opera stuff, it feels very much like those settings. So for example, if you've read Ogres, or if you've read Firewalkers, or if you've read Ironclads, they've all got this kind of feel to the world about them. And I would put Cage of Souls very much in with that setting, that style, the place we're at in the world, definitely similar to those other stories. Most of those are novellas. In fact, all three of those are novellas. This is like a novel-length version of that. I really loved the prose. I loved the way it was written, following this first-person viewpoint. All in all, definitely had me engaged with the characters and the relationships that were built. I think it was written incredibly well. As far as standalones go, this man knows how to write standalones. If I wanted a fantasy standalone, I'd go to Gabriel K. If you want a sci-fi or like a, low sci-fi standalones, Adrian Tchaikovsky, he is your man. just absolutely incredible. 5 stars for me all day, every day. I highly recommend Cage of Souls. And then the last one from that TBR I got to is an interesting one for me. This is book 2 of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. It is called The Drawing of the Three. When I read The Gunslinger last month, it was the first Stephen King book I had ever read, and it is a very obscure. It is unique. It is just a unique book. It is very peculiar, interesting, obscure. I don't know how to describe The Gunslinger, but I loved it. I loved the way it was written. The style and the prose was a big positive for me. I loved the intrigue and the mystery. It was just so good, so good. It was interesting then moving on to The Drawing of the Three, which is a very much more normal book in some respects. It feels like The Gunslinger was almost this crazy prologue to a series we're now just starting in The Drawing of the Three. And I kind of liked that. It was interesting. I love Roland. I love the character of the Gunslinger. It's got a very quick start into just stuff happening. But then I really love the way we explore the world and the magic system, and then the new characters we get. The new characters we get are just really, really good. I love those new characters we get. I think really well done. We really get a feeling for them. I love the way that King head hops and the way we get these characters written from their perspective, but then how we see them from an outside perspective. Just done very, very well. It's very much more real world urban fantasy than I was expecting, which I don't know why I wasn't expecting that so much. And I suppose from The Gunslinger I wasn't expecting that as much until later on, but then I really did enjoy the way that got weaved in. I can see that this is going to be an absolutely mental series. Like, I can't even imagine how crazy this could go, considering what we're looking at and what's happening in book 2. By book 7, it's going to be so meta and so weird, and I'm kind of here for it. I'm just here for it. I'm excited. I think the character work alone is deserving of 5 stars for The Drawing of the Three. I think it's so good. Let alone the fact that I love this setting in this world and the way that it was introduced in The Gunslinger. I am going to probably blitz through the Dark Tower series, and I can imagine me becoming a bit of an evangelist for it, like telling everyone that why haven't you read the Dark Tower yet, because it seems super interesting. It's super weird and quirky, but I'm really loving it so far, and I hope that it continues that way. I hope it continues being off the rails mental, and it doesn't do that in a bad way, but it continues to do that in a fun and interesting and exciting way. So there are the 5 that from my TBR from last month. Now let's move on to the 2 that I added. So the first one of these, again, you probably won't be surprised to hear, is a Kazuo Ishiguro book. Now this is the third Ishiguro book that I have read. And this is one that I picked up because I have had people tell me that the ones I've read aren't his best works. So I'd read Clara and the Sun, and I'd read When We Were Orphans, and both of them were meh. They were fine. I wasn't in love. They were 3-star reads, maybe 3.5 if we're being kind. They were fine. I didn't hate them, but they were just meh. I just didn't love them. Now, I was told, okay, they're not his best work. They are ones that people don't love so much. There are 2 you want to read. You want to read Never Let Me Go, and you want to read Remains of the Day. So I picked up the Remains of the Day. And again, it was just meh. Now, this is historical fiction. This isn't fantasy. And we are following a butler of an old English estate, an old English house that has recently been bought by an American gentleman, and it's sort of about the end of butlering. It's about the end of this proper stately English home society. It is about this transition. It is about his life as he goes through this transition. Again, we get lots of flashbacks. There's a lot of flashback books this month, and it's meant to be subtle and sort of quiet and reflective, and it was boring. It was just boring. I just don't get it. Like, it was fine, and it was trying to be clever, and it was trying to be subversive, and, you know, lots of subtext and subtle, and it was just boring. Again, it was a 3-star read, maybe 3.5 stars. It just fits in this Ushiguru mold of sort of nothingness. I don't hate it. It's so boring. I don't even hate it, which is just upsetting. So I've actually also got Never Let Me Go, and I'm a glutton for punishment in that I'm probably going to read that soon. And then really, if I don't get on with that, Ishiguro's done for me. Like, I don't hate it. His books are fine. They're just fine. So yeah, I don't have much more to say about that. I don't know why I keep subjecting myself to his books. I don't know if it's because they're quite short and I'm like, oh, that'd be a quick read. But yeah, maybe 3.5 stars, probably 3 stars to be honest. It was fine. It was subtle. It was interesting. It had some interesting themes, but it was pretty boring. The last book that I got to was not boring. I was a big fan of this read. I was a really, really big fan of this read. And this was The Lies of Locke Lamora. This is book 1 of the Gentleman Bastard series, and I have been thinking about getting into the Gentleman Bastards for a little while. In fact, it was one of the 5 series on my 5 series I'm definitely going to read in 2022. Now, I've started 4 of those now, which is really exciting. I've finished, or about to have finished 2 of them, which is even more exciting. But for me, I've been putting it off for a little while, and I really hope that the next book will come out soon, because I want to be in with this series as we go with it. You know what I mean? I want to be part of the hype. I know Murphy Napier absolutely loves this series. It's her favourite series of all time, and after reading book 1, I can totally see why. So, Lies of Locke Lamora, we are following Locke Lamora. He is our titular character. We are following him and the Gentleman Bastards. These are other people he is working with as part of this thieving crew. They are working on the underground, but they aren't just your normal thieves. They aren't pickpockets. They run cons. This book is heavily reliant on its flashbacks, oftentimes to explain parts of the action that are happening currently, oftentimes to give us a setup for what is about to be happening in the current action as well. And I like the way that Scott Lynch does that. I think he does that very well. I think it's weaved in really well. I think the reason people love this book and the series is that they love the found family. They love Locke and Jean and the twins. They love the feeling of this group of thieves doing their thing, pulling these cons, Bug as well. It is what people love about this series. And I totally get that. I think it's done really well. I actually really enjoyed the writing as well. I think Scott Lynch's writing is quite funny, but is also very nicely written. The prose is great, and I loved the use of flashbacks. I know people hate flashbacks. I really love the use of flashbacks here. I think Scott Lynch uses them very well and very cleverly by using them to telegraph things, but not always the most obvious thing. Sometimes it's the obvious thing, and that's fine, but sometimes it's more subtle than that, and I love that as well. Sometimes things pay off immediately, sometimes they're a little bit later to be paid off from the flashbacks, and again, I love the way that's done and the way that's interspersed. But this is a con book, this is a thieving crew, but it is about Locke and Jean and the twins and Bug, so this group of characters who are this found family that we have. Very low magic for a fantasy book, all takes place within a city, and I really like that. I like some of the politics of the underworld and the underground thieving group. I think it's just all great, yeah. Really good, really loved it. Definitely a 5-star read for me. Really excited for Red Seas Under Red Skies, which you will see in a second, should be coming up soon, but that is another 5-star read for me. So, in May, I read 7 books. So I've got one of them, The Remains of the Day, that was a 3-star. I gave A Traitor and Skyhold 4 stars, Jade War 4.5, and then the rest were 5 stars. So Changes by Jim Butcher, The Drawing of the Three, Stephen King, Cage of Souls, Adrian Tchaikovsky, and The Lies of Locke Lamora, Scott Lynch, all got a solid 5 stars for me. A very good reading month in terms of quality, even if a pretty average amount of quantity. Great, quickly moving on to my TBR for June. I know we're already partly through the month, but I've only put 5 books on here because I'm trying to be realistic about how much I'm going to be able to read with a newborn, and especially getting back to work in the next few weeks. I need to be realistic. So 5 books on here, a lot of continuations. So 1, I want to read Ghost Story by Jim Butcher. This is book 13 of the Dresden Files. It'll be a reread for the umpteenth time. I really love this series. It'll be a very easy read / listen for me. Going to be no issues with that whatsoever. I want to be reading Jade Legacy, which in fact, as of right now, I'm about 90% of the way through and really enjoying. So that's good that this one is almost off the list and that series is almost done. So keep an eye out for, should I read the Green Bone Saga? Then the next 3 are all continuations of series. So 2 of them I've talked about already. The first one of those being The Wastelands, which is book 3 of The Dark Tower by Stephen King. Red Seas Under Red Skies, which is book 2 of The Gentleman Bastards by Scott Lynch. And then the last book on this TBR that I want to get to is The Obelisk Gate, which is book 2 of the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This was on my TBR for last month as well. It was one that I wasn't able to get to, I just didn't have time, but I'm still really excited for it. I loved the 5th season. I'm very excited for The Obelisk Gate, and I'm really hoping that 5 books is a suitable number, but we shall see. Let me know down below what your favourite read of May was. Let me know what you're most excited for in June as well, actually, because I'm really pumped for all 5 of those books in June. I am super excited for. So let me know down below what you're most excited for in your reading month. And hopefully I'll see you guys again soon. There should be another video up here of my older stuff for you to go check out if you've not seen it before. Who knows what it's going to be?